Are you ready to dive into the most mysterious story of the Wild West? Johnny Ringo was a feared gunslinger and a member of the infamous Cowboys gang, but his life came to a sudden and enigmatic end. What really happened? We'll discover that at the end of the video, but before that, I'll let my colleague explain you his fascinating life.
That's where his legend started. Well, those who have heard of Johnny Ringo know him as a gentleman who could sound off like Shakespeare. Also, many had even glamorized him as one of the deadliest gunslingers of the Old West. However, it all began on May 3, 1850, when John Peter Ringo was born as the first child of Martin and Mary in Indiana. Since those days back in the Old West was very hard, so most families were often forced to move from place to place for food and safety. Years after, the previous small family of 3 had become 7. So his parents, along with Ringo and his 4 siblings, decided to cross the country. While at the age of 14, the people around Ringo noticed that he had talents like sharp eyesight paired with his agile hands. No one knew that young boy was so talented and would become an unmatched gunslinger later on. However, as his family rode the wagon trail and left for a better pasture, unbeknown to them, a tragic incident would happen. It was at that time, Martin, Ringo's dad, was cleaning his firearm, then accidentally discharged it, immediately resulting in a tragic death that had left the whole family obviously shell-shocked. Despite that, Ringo's family was resilient, like most frontier people, and made it to their destination after a year. You would be surprised that during that time, they actually stayed at the place of Ringo's cousin, the younger brothers. Although it was unclear what exactly happened during Ringo's adolescent years, there were still accounts that he was a drunkard and a young delinquent who left his home in 1869. However, his sister later claimed that Ringo actually left to work as a farmer. Anyway, Ringo actually did fire a gun in public in Texas and was charged for it, formally starting his notoriety. At that time, Johnny Ringo would be caught up with the infamous Hoodoo War. It was in 1875 that a blood feud started over the cattle barons living in Mason County, Texas. Although the Germans and American ranchers were at each other's neck, suspecting with each other as the instigator on the ongoing tidal wave of cattle rustling, Ringo's involvement was not over cattle, but was instead for avenging the death of his close friends, who were tricked and ambushed by a local gambler. Ringo had got himself in trouble. Well, seemed not satisfied, he and his group came to the house of another alleged collaborator, but was surprised in their arrival that the person was heavily armed. So Ringo and his friends rode away. After the incident, Ringo, who supposedly be afraid of the law for his crimes, instead bragged it publicly along with his friends. Also, according to some accounts of Texas Rangers, either one of his friends or Ringo allegedly said that they had put the gambler in his place, and if someone would not bury him, then he would stink. Well, it would not be a war if it was centered only on one gambler's death. So more killings followed, and 4 days later, the members of the masked vigilante group, along with Ringo, gunned down another 3 men. However, despite that, no arrest warrants were issued against Ringo and his cohorts. Instead, he was arrested twice for other charges. The first occasion was for threatening the town's safety, and he was charged with illegal discharging of a firearm in public, since he literally fired his pistol in the middle of the town while drunk. It was said that during that time, Ringo had further established his identity as a notorious outlaw. But many saw Johnny Ringo as a poetic gentleman who was both an alcoholic and a bad-tempered person, since he was a familiar face and patron of numerous saloons and surprisingly made an incident out of a man who refused the drink he offered. So, as a result, he shot him. Well, the second arrest was far more serious than the previous one, since Ringo and a colleague had threatened to kill a county sheriff and its deputy. Immediately, the two got imprisoned. But the authorities were still worried that their friends might break them out of prison and thus had transferred them to Austin. On their way, Ringo became more infamous as he appeared in the newspapers. Mainly for Ringo has taken an active participation in the Mason County War. However, did you know that his name was mistakenly spelled as Ringold? In fact, many were confused at first, but since the news was published for Germans and Americans, so some believe that it was mistranslated. It wasn't long before Ringo and his friends were once in the news again, because despite being arrested for making threats with law enforcers, they were still given a chance for appeal. However, it seemed that they couldn't wait any longer for their case to be heard, since their cohorts broke them out of prison just soon after. Sadly, Ringo's colleague died a month later. Although the authorities had made sure that Ringo would be known as a notorious outlaw on the run, still, Ringo only managed to evade the arrest for a few months before getting imprisoned again. Well, Lady Luck smiled at Ringo, and his earlier appeal actually went through, so he got acquitted and once was a free man again. However, things didn't remain that way. Although Ringo was really an elusive outlaw, his warrant for killing the gambler had finally caught up with him. But with the devil's luck, no witnesses were willing to testify against Ringo, thus he got acquitted again. Also, fun fact that happened that time. Did you know that Ringo had almost turned from an outlaw to a lawman, since he was being offered a position as a constable? However, it was not known if Ringo even bothered to take up the position. Well, shortly after that, in 1881, Ringo entered the stage in Tombstone, Arizona. There he continued his notoriety when he became associated with the Clanton gang. They did all sorts of crimes you could imagine, where they robbed stagecoaches, stole livestock, and even murdered people. The Cochise County Cowboys, along with Ringo, expanded their cattle rustling operations along the Mexican border, and then, shortly after that, Ringo returned to Texas. However, at the time, the Clantons and McLaury would meet their makers, the most feared lawman, Wyatt Earp, with his closest friend, Doc Holliday. As usual, Ringo was again put behind bars for his troublesome personality indeed. It was when he and Doc Holliday got into a heated fight concerning the rumor that Ringo was involved in a recent stagecoach robbery. Well, the two had almost had a showdown on the streets of Tombstone, but before they started reaching for their guns, a constable would go from behind and defuse the conflict. Of course, both were arrested for carrying guns in town. Shortly after that, Ringo lost on a poker game and was refused to be loaned, so he pointed his gun at the other players, which got him arrested. Unfortunately, on that arrest, Ringo missed the legendary OK Corral gunfight. While he was imprisoned, the Earp brothers, along with Doc Holliday, were seen walking in the streets of Tombstone, not in their casual attires, but as if they would bring retribution. It was until the platinum-coated pistol was fired. After the 30-second shootout, the Earp brothers were wounded, while the Clantons with the McLaurys were dead. However, soon after that, Morgan was assassinated, and Virgil was permanently maimed. So Wyatt vowed to seek vengeance, and with the Earp vendetta ride, they sent every Cochise cowboy they found in their graves. After killing Curly Brocious, Wyatt and Holliday left Tombstone, as they had warrants and posse looming over their heads, led by Sheriff Bean. However, Wyatt vowed not to stop his revenge on the Cowboys even after that. Since then, Ringo and Wyatt became under each other's radar and wanted to exact vengeance for their fallen colleagues. At that time, Ringo's friends were either killed or just left Tombstone, so now alone. He tried to reconnect with his family, but was disowned for the fact that he was a notorious outlaw. This pushed Ringo to drown his sorrows and regret on alcohol, and became heavily depressed. However, although this was a trial for Ringo, for his enemies, it was a chance. Later on, death knocked on the poor outlaw's door.
Before we delve into the theories, we encourage you to share your own theories or insights in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and engage in a lively discussion about this enigmatic character's untimely end. One theory suggests that Ringo might have decided to end his own life, perhaps due to his deteriorating mental state or a weariness of evading the law. Johnny Ringo was known to be entangled in the ongoing feud between the Earp and Clanton factions, characterized by a history of violence and vendettas. Some suggest that he might have unwittingly found himself caught in the crossfire of this feud, with someone from either faction possibly responsible for his tragic end. Ringo had connections to cattle rustling and range wars in the Arizona Territory. It's conceivable that his fate was linked to disputes over stolen livestock or land conflicts with local ranchers.